Breaking tonight, new reports on a high-profile terrorist who the Obama administration released from Guantanamo Bay. Now back on the battlefield and targeting the United States. Ibrahim al-Kozi was an Osama bin Laden loyalist deemed a high risk to return to terror. Nonetheless, we let him out back in 2012. This week, we saw the release of new propaganda coming from this guy in the form of a video out of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Featured a man believed to be al-Kozi calling on Muslims living in the West to kill their neighbors. Look at his picture. Here now, Republican presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz. No one's shocked.
Well, sadly, I mean, look, these terrorists tell us they want to kill us. And the Obama administration ignores what they say. They release him. They've released other terrorists. They've released senior Taliban leaders. And they turn around and they take up arms and they go back to trying to kill us. And you know what? American soldiers may well lose their lives trying to capture her or kill him a second time. Although if he's killed, it won't be a second time.
But people feel, you see this guy returning to terror. Yeah. Then we have the report about the State Department saying, you know, they came out today and said, you know, our procedures are good. They're all good. The visa thing, not to worry. Well, you let in a terrorist who killed 14 people, so they're really not all good. And people are feeling very disconcerted about whether our government is doing the right things to protect us.
Well, and it's abundantly clear it isn't. Anyone who watched President Obama's speech after the San Bernardino attack was horrified. This is a president who's in denial, whose head is stuck in the sand. He still refuses to say the words radical Islamic terrorism. He stands up and argues.
He's going to get the mainstream Muslims mad at it. He thinks, but he really does believe we can't alienate the good Muslims who want to work with us against terror by demonizing the religion.
It's worse than that. He believes the bad guys are the American people. It's why he stands up and says, we need to take away the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. That's exactly backwards. And this has been the consistent problem in the Obama administration, is they can't distinguish from good guys and bad guys. Not being willing to say radical Islamic terrorism contributes to their inability to fight terrorism. So, for example, in Fort Hood, Nidal Hasan, they called it workplace violence.
Just today, the White House referred to San Bernardino as gun violence. They were asked, is the president going to go out and visit those families? They said, we don't know, maybe, maybe not, but it's unfortunate. Sometimes he does that in instances of gun violence.
Well, what you see is the president over and over again acts as an apologist for radical Islamic terrorists. And let me be clear, the word apologist is a strong word. But I think you and I were both at the National Prayer Breakfast where President Obama spoke. And it was the day after the Jordanian pilot was lit on fire by ISIS. Remember, the King of Jordan had to fly back because of that terrorist attack. And President Obama got up and he analogized ISIS's crimes. He said, well, Christians and Jews kill people too, and he compared it to the Crusades and the Inquisition. The last I checked, those ended hundreds of years ago. It's not asking too much to keep them in the present millennium. And that is exactly the argument ISIS uses. When the president gets up and gives a rationalization, a justification. You know, John Kerry said the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack was understandable. No, it was not. It was evil. It was grotesque. And we need a commander-in-chief who stands up to defeat it.
Kerry did say it, but he walked it back. Let me ask you about the NSA. We've talked about this before. But now Rubio and others are hitting you, right? As they say, they point to the fact that out in California, that, let me get it right, just 4 days before the terrorist attack, the USA Freedom Act, which you supported, which replaced basically the surveillance program we had with the NSA, limited our access to critical information. Because of that new act, which you supported, which many Republicans did not, we can now potentially only get 18 months worth of this guy's phone records as opposed to 5 years, which we could have had under the act which you opposed.
Well, look, these attacks are silliness. You're right that Marco Rubio's super PAC is spending $200,000 running attack ads directed at me. And these attack ads are suggesting that I, along with Senator Mike Lee and Tim Scott and Chuck Grassley and the National Rifle Association, that somehow conservatives in the House and Senate were responsible for the Paris terror attack. And it's just silly. And I got to tell you, Megyn, you know, Mark Levin a couple of days ago wrote a great column in Conservative Review where he said that Rubio is lying and that he's following a Alinskyite attacks just like Barack Obama.
I asked Rubio about that just yesterday. But what about that, the 18 months versus the 5 years? And did we compromise our security by getting rid of that NSA surveillance program?
We didn't in any way, shape, or form. What the USA Freedom Act did was two things. Number one, it ended the federal government's bulk collection of metadata of law-abiding citizens, of your and my phone records. But number two, critically, it expanded our ability to target terrorist phones. And that's what Senator Rubio and his super PAC are lying about. It dramatically expanded the scope. It used to be, it was a relatively small slice of phone records that could be searched. Now you can search virtually every phone record. That makes law enforcement better able to target terrorists, and Rubio knows that.
Last question quickly. Behind closed doors, you said that the question of judgment is challenging in the presidential race for Donald Trump. Will you say that publicly, and why not, if not?
Listen, what I have said many times is, particularly in the wake of the Paris attack in San Bernardino, that the American people are looking with greater seriousness and gravity at a commander-in-chief. And they are making a judgment of every candidate who has the experience, who has the judgment.
Behind closed doors.
No, I discussed it in general. This is a New York Times report based on anonymous sources.
You deny doing it?
And so what I will say is that the voters are making the determination for every candidate who has the experience and judgment to have their finger on the button, to be commander-in-chief, to make the hard decisions to keep this country safe. And what I can tell you, Megyn, is if I'm elected president, I will keep this country safe.
Senator Cruz, great to see you.
Thank you, Megyn.
Thanks for being here.